A few years ago, we started a thought leader panel series at our summit, and we have one each year, and it allows us to hear various perspectives of key issues that are affecting inbound travel from some of the influential leaders throughout the country. So for the first time, we're actually offering the Thought Leader panel by webinar, which should be perfect and should go very smoothly since we're all getting to be pros at virtual meetings and educations these days. Perhaps that's one of the elements of the new normal. Today, we have a diverse group of industry leaders who will share their views on what's happening, what the foreseeable future might look like, and what we might expect as longer-term outcomes from COVID-19. They come from different parts of the country, different types of destinations and different markets, and our panel will provide a well-rounded view of inbound travel. I'd like to thank our panel today for lending their time and their wisdom. And I'm gonna just do a quick introduction. I think most of them need no introduction, but our panelists today are Elliot Ferguson, President and CEO of Destination DC. Elliot will moderate the panel. Gloria Land, owner and president of Tour America. Peter Van Berkel, president of Travalco USA and incoming chairman for IITA. Vicki Varela is the managing director of Utah Office of Tourism. Unfortunately, Fred Dixon had to pass along his regrets at the last minute. He was pulled in just moments ago to a meeting at City Hall, and he felt very bad that he had to cancel on such late notice, but he promises he will join us in a future session, so we'll hold him to that for sure. Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our panel. So Elliot, take it away.
All right, Lisa, thank you, and Rebecca, and it's definitely my pleasure to be here with you all during National Travel and Tourism Week. I will say that when Lisa originally told me about it, I thought it was a panel on how to cut your hair at home and how to do successful perms and what have you, and home decorating tips for Zoom calls. But I guess the tone has changed a little bit, and we'll actually be talking about the new normal, and hopefully it's a temporary normal, so which I gladly accept. So I know that Leticia Ciotati from my team is on the call, and she and I talked a little bit beforehand, and clearly I have a lot of respect for all the panelists, and I'm happy to moderate and do the best I can. You know, this is a busy week for all of us, interesting time. Roger Dow, myself, Chris Thompson, our mayor, and a group of folks that are tied to Reopen DC. We all had our travel tourism event today. We no longer call it a rally because, you know, normally we're excited about where we're going, but right now it's almost like we're walking through life with blinders in terms of what's going to happen next in our industry. There's so many different organizations that have what I'm considering manifestos in terms of what reopening looks like, and we're looking at all of them and taking bits and pieces and making sure that from the meetings market to the leisure market, you know, be it the AHLA version of what hotels are doing to the Wynn Hotel specifically, and everyone else is out there. Of course, U.S. Travel is taking the lead with from a medical perspective, and of course trying to harness all of those things in one place. Because as I said to Roger, and of course you all know my role as chair of the U.S. Travel Association, in addition to all the things in which we should be focusing on from an advocacy and lobbying effort, we need to make sure that we have, at least as best we possibly can, one standard practice in terms of expectations. Nothing would be worse than us having to say that in the 50 states, territories, and the District of Columbia, each one of us have a different process for boarding a bus, or for meeting in a hotel, or eating in a restaurant. So it's important that our messaging is clear, because the moment we mess it up and they start tweeting about how terrible it is, be it in whatever our destination is, then we're all kind of, we're doomed. And I know that we'll probably be focusing on the domestic market primarily first. This week, we're also celebrating National Nurses Week. So I would be remiss if I don't recognize all the valiant efforts of those that are on the front lines, making sure that as folks are dealing with COVID-19, that they're helping them get back to good health. And so let's by all means recognize what's happening there. So as Lisa has asked me to do this, this is the time of the international travel is at a dead stop. Everyone's asking what's the new norm, what's it going to look like post-COVID-19, what to expect in terms of inbound travel, and what will we need to be doing differently to ensure health and safety standards for those in which we're trying to bring to our destinations and which you all and the ones you are working with. No one really knows the answer right now, and we're all working feverishly to come up with some standards which are extremely important because, again, safety is going to be extremely important. And, the key thing for all of us is reporters asking us, when do I think DC is going to open and what's going to happen next? This is uncharted territory for all of us. So, perhaps in 20 years, we'll look back on this as the experts as to how when the global community came to a standstill, but now we're still in the throes of trying to make it all happen. So as was referenced earlier, we've got an amazing panel. Fortunately, Fred has been texting me while I've been talking to you all and sending his apologies for not being here. But with Peter and Gloria and Vicky, I'm sure we'll be able to give you some insight as to things that are important. I think Rebecca has set it up, whereas if you have questions that you want to ask, you can use the chat bot, and we'll get those questions and we'll incorporate it as best we can in this process, and we'll save the last 10 to 15 minutes for additional Q&A. So with that, and with those on the panel unmuting themselves, I'm going to ask each of them, describe your vision of what the new normal looks like and what that means for your particular organization as you're focusing on the future. And ladies first, I'll start with Gloria, to Vicky, and then to Peter.
Okay, can you hear me?
You can.
Okay, good. All right. So the first questions, right? The situations will definitely not going to be normal. There will definitely be a lot of changes. But of course, the changes actually will really go into, again, is the first major factors, then is going to link with others. For example, I would say, the major factors, again, is first is the destination, the lodging, and the transportations. Then, of course, we'll have to see the travelers' demand. But really, as a matter of fact, when we're dealing with the international travel, the most important factor is really the airlift. I think this is actually the major issue. Of course, now we're all talking about, provided that actually there is a vaccine, there is some resolutions actually, with especially with the situations, the pandemic, then we'll see, whether actually we'll have the airlines start resuming the flights. I think this is actually the most important that we need. Then when we actually see the flights are resuming, that is actually how we are planning to market ourselves. So this is actually what we're seeing, with the changes, because as of now, we're seeing actually a majority of the flights going to the gateways really actually have been either canceled or actually has been reduced. And some of the situations of the flight is they eliminate actually the number of seats actually in each flight too, especially this, we're talking about international flights. Yeah, so this is, then of course, other major factors we'll be seeing is how the hotels is going to address actually with the international travelers. I think this will be some of the questions that later on we'll be talking about.
Okay, thank you, Gloria. Now, Vicky, with the same question in your role representing the state of Utah, which clearly, amongst all the amazing things you have to offer, it's the outdoor experience that normally resonates. How does that same question, how would you answer the same question?
We feel like our outdoor recreation destinations are a huge strategic advantage for us because what we have experienced so far is that people are hungry to have these outdoor experiences where they can breathe in the clean air, escape from the COVID caves of our homes. So that will be a significant part of our marketing strategy. But as we all know, there are so many other things that have to happen first. And I think she's absolutely correct that it starts with the airlift. And how can we influence the airlines and assist the airlines in expanding first domestic travel and then international travel. And then within that, what can we communicate that will help our visitors feel that it's safe to travel? We've all seen the research, and I'm heartened that it's changing a little bit right now, both nationally and locally. But still, a majority of people don't feel safe yet to get outside of their homes. And so far as we can tell, that's going to be a long, gradual process of convincing people that there is a post-COVID new normal. And so in Utah, we are figuring out the tools that will communicate best practices to consumers. Is it some sort of a COVID certification, and then a marketing campaign around that? We're having those types of discussions. But a sense of public safety is a critical driver. We do, many of us have been through many crises before, and this is the worst. It's like everything else we've been through was preparing us for this. I do have a strongly held philosophy that you never let a crisis go to waste. How do you come out of this? What do you learn from this whole new world that makes you better at what you do? Certainly what we're experiencing in Utah, and I think I'm hearing from my peers around the country, is that the collaborative nature of this industry is now on steroids. That we know as the hardest hit industry across the board, we've got to rally together to find our way out of it. So we're finding ways that we can improve. And this goes right to our inbound operators, and a view that we've always had in Utah that we've just been discussing more, is that we have got to respect and this group and amplify the capacity of this group to be a bridge through this whole transition to a new normal. The inbound operators that we work closely with are so critical to consumers getting the confidence to come back into market. So that's one part of it. Another part in Utah is that we feel like it's important to leverage the conversation around this heightened stewardship that we all feel around protecting our own personal safety and the safety of the people around us. We are leveraging that into trying to call on people's stewardship about our precious environment as well. And so really trying to condition people that part of the new normal in Utah is an enhanced respect for other people's personal safety and for the environment around them.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. And I think that, as I frame everything you said, which is what everyone's thinking about right now, Peter, with your question, the same thing in terms of the new normal. I think it's interesting because leaving the travel rally, whatever we call it, with our mayor and with Roger Dow and with Chris Thompson, there are certain realities for us. One of them is that I said that group business, convention meetings, the citywides are probably not going to happen in 2020. I also said that the international market as it pertains to the leisure traveler is going to rebound a lot slower for obvious reasons. So I'm curious, same thing in terms of your vision, and as you're looking at the rest of 2020 going into 2021, are you looking at the rest of this year and saying it's going to be, what's your vision as you look at the market, especially since you are really focusing on FIT, group and incentive from an international perspective?
Well, thank you very much for the question. The new normal is what we make it to be. So we have an opportunity now to shape our own destiny, and by understanding all the different components in the industry in a very specific manner, we have an opportunity also here. What I mean by that is the following. You are indicating already that there are many different types of travel. Of course, the individual traveler that is driving with a rental car in the western part of the United States, where there's low density, has much less of an issue with social distancing than indeed meetings and conventions. So what we see happening is, first of all, the demand from the origin markets, and I'm specifically talking about the European origin markets, Northern Europe, UK, Scandinavia, Germany, but also even from very hard hit countries like Italy and Spain. The desire to travel is beyond discussion. That is absolutely there. So I don't think that there is an issue that people don't want to travel. There is a major issue with confidence, with addressing fears, addressing concerns about health and safety. So whatever we can do there, and we'll come back to that later in the conversation, that will be very important. So I think the most important part is that we can address the health and safety concerns that are there, so that we can properly prepare. Yes, it will be for us, for example, we do a lot of group tours, escort tours, and yes, we're working also with coach companies already to try to establish protocols that are taking the lead actually from the airlines, because as indicated before, airlines are absolutely crucial to any incoming traveler. And the best practices that are available there, you can see what can happen. We have had conversation with companies that are already talking about how can they disinfect coaches, the same thing as we're seeing at some of the hotel companies. So any unified method of approaching this will enable us to show our clientele, because that is what it's all about, and give them the confidence that we are doing anything in a unified manner, so that we are ready to receive and promise and deliver a safe product where they can feel good about coming. We have to keep in mind that aside from the desire to travel, which is absolutely prevalent in the markets that we're dealing with, there are some additional advantages also. Depending on the country, there are versions of, let's call it, they are being called the Corona vouchers, where the funds that the clients paid to travel companies are protected by guarantee funds. And many governments have made the decision, in coordination also with the airlines, that the money that they paid is not necessarily that they get that back as a refund, but it is a guaranteed amount that they can spend with this company. Consider it a store credit. That was driven very much by the airlines, because if all those bookings would have to be unwound, that would have created an even larger liquidity crisis, as we are seeing already at some of the airlines. The side effect of that is that there are a lot of clients that were forced and displaced have rebooked. So we are seeing a lot of rebookings to either later in the year or even to next year. And we'll come back to this later. We will have some requirements what that is concerned also, especially what availability of product is concerned. So those are some very good points. So the business of the clients who were supposed to travel in the past 2-3 months, for a very good portion, that business is not lost. And now we have to see, of course, how long the lockdowns and the limitations will last, because that will determine, of course, how good or impaired of a summer season we're all going to experience.
Okay, and that very good answer, Peter. I think the key things I'm hearing from you: safety, consumer confidence. Clearly, we need the airlift, and we need standard methods in terms of cleanliness methods for the airlines, for hotel rooms, things that are really clear that we can communicate. I'm kind of curious for the long haul traveler, because there are questions about wearing being on an airplane and wearing a mask. If I'm on a flight, which we've all been on flights for 10 plus hours, it's not realistic that I'm probably going to have a mask on for 10 plus hours comfortably. That might be the new norm. And so therefore, as we look at some of these standards, and you all came up with your marketing budgets for 2020 last year, now you're amending them. What are you looking at as you're now saying, okay, now I need to amend what I put in place for 2020 and 2021, as you're looking at the probability and the comfort and the safety and consumer confidence in terms of travel? From our perspective, domestically, I've got 50 million people that live within 4.5-hour drive of Washington, D.C. The data tells me that the international market is going to be 12 to 18 months and slower in terms of rebounding than the domestic market. And so therefore, there's some things in which I've got to look at, and you all have to look at as you're trying to determine and talk to your stakeholders as to what to expect for 2020 and 2021. And a lot of it is all tied to a vaccine, as well as other things that are not confirmed as of yet. So I'm framing all of that in a question, and I'll leave it up to the three of you. Anyone want to try to tackle that in terms of how you're retooling your marketing plan for 2020, 2021, and with all these things that are unknown, even though we know that there's a demand to travel, people want to get out of the house, we're sick and tired of being in the house, we want to get on the road, but how is that really going to affect our efforts domestically and internationally as we're looking at that traveler coming to the U.S.?
Elliot, I'm happy to start on that. Our projections are that it will be 2021 before Utah returns to 2019 revenues. And that's based on a CBRE study.
You said 2024, Vicki?
2021.
2021 before you return to 2019.
Yes. And
what part of 2021?
I think it's in the September, August to September was the last I saw.
Okay, so you're saying that the data is telling you that they're anticipating a rebound for you in 2021, but in the month of September 2021?
That we will hit the 2019 revenues.
Right.
So, it's a long, slow recovery path, with the international being the latest. And so with that context, we are actually currently, we still have our full marketing budget intact. We are in discussions with legislators about a range of cuts that could go up to 10%, but we're working to retain our full marketing budget, given the fact that our industry was the hardest hit. Within our marketing budget, at this point, we are still on track with our traditional marketing strategy. I should say that we're not allocating any of that directly to best practices and COVID safety at this point. because in Utah we have a Utah Leads Together economic recovery plan, and as part of that, we're creating these COVID certifications, best practices communications that I described earlier. And so we are optimistic that we'll be able to continue with the robust marketing strategy that we had planned. Now, within our marketing strategy, we're changing up our storytelling some, as I described, to focus on the, right now, we're just doing social media, as we see that the consumer sentiment is shifting enough that people feel safe to start to travel. We'll focus on regional car travel, and then incrementally expand into our international marketing. And so with our international partners, we're focusing right now on what can we do better together over the long term, so that when we're ready to market again, we'll be able to do it effectively.
Okay, and I'm assuming that the data that you're sharing is predicated on some type of vaccine being introduced as we're looking at.
Yeah.
So in essence, if that does not happen, then those numbers can change. You know, there may be even more slippage beyond September 2021 for rebounding.
Yeah.
So any other trains of thought from Gloria, Peter, anything you want to add?
Well, oh, sorry.
So you can go ahead first. Yeah.
Okay, for inbound operators, our marketing efforts are of course not in the same realm as DMOs. What we keep hearing from our clients, and it's basically a repeat of what I said before, is that there is that enormous amount of pent-up demand, and keep in mind that many of the early booking markets, especially in Western Europe, by the time that we were dealing here with the travel ban, a very, very large percentage of the business was booked already for this year. At this moment, still, even for the month July, August, September, there is an enormous amount of business on the books still for all the companies that are dealing with these markets, because these European markets are booking very, very early. And so the question will be, first of all, is till how long do these travel bans last? What is the airlift going to be? And what is the percentage of bookings that you can retain? Because that will make a major difference on how this year will shape up. However, even as I said before, these bookings will move over to next year for a large part. So, and that is also the desire. We have to understand that the international market, into the long haul international markets, especially from Europe, is not a market that makes the decision to come to the United States very lightly. This is a very conscious decision that is not based on price, because there are many destinations that are much less expensive. This is a destination of choice, and the choice is there. That decision was made. It is therefore more a matter of postponing than immediately cancelling. And matters be rebooked. That will depend on the circumstances on the ground. The feedback that we get from our partners overseas is that they want to move ahead, of course, and as soon as it is safe to go and the clientele feels safe, then it will take place.
Okay, and before we move on to you too, Gloria, in regards to vouchers that you referenced earlier, what happens if the business that is honoring the voucher actually goes out of business? How, is there something that's being discussed in terms of redeeming, or how does that work, or is there a concern there?
I'm making some very general statements. Rules and regulations even in the individual EU countries are different. In the Netherlands, for example, they are guaranteed. They are guaranteed by the guarantee fund that also protects the money of travelers in the first place. So it's basically only an extension of the guarantees that are in place. Germany has slightly different rules. In the big picture, they are for the large part protected. Yes, else it would be a major concern for travelers. But once again, that is different per country. But that helps to keep this to keep business on the books.
Okay.
So, and that is completely different than, for example, here in the US, where a lot of companies, where everybody wants their money back immediately, and then will decide either to travel or not. So this gives also an incentive for clients to travel. Also, especially in the transatlantic airline situation, many of the airfares are not refundable. They are, you can get a credit, but you cannot get a refund. Or the refund is only applicable after 12 or even 18 months, depending on the country. So that was in Germany, for example, that was done. And the rules for packaged travel versus standalone travel are different. We see also as a result, as one of the changes, that consumers are looking for the safety that the professional travel industry can provide. In Germany, for example, in the Netherlands and Scandinavian countries, there are very specific requirements, and there is a duty of care imposed on the tour operator, so that if there is an issue, that you can apply to the tour operator and they will bring you home. If you see the repatriation efforts that have been taking place, how tens of thousands of passengers or hundreds of thousands of passengers were repatriated from around the world, and they were picked up by their travel company with charter flights, etc., etc. That was a movement of epic proportions, and that is not spoken much about here in the United States, but that creates a confidence in travel that if something happens in the destination, that they will be taken care of. We see at the same time a demand for more travel insurance, and we all know that there are limitations and exclusions on pandemics, but in general there is that search for safety, and whether that can be provided by either a tour operator or a professional travel organization, or by travel insurance, or any combination thereof, that creates a reappreciation for the market segment that we are also working in. And completely do-it-yourself long-haul travel is expected to take a little bit a step back, because if you would have traveled as what they sometimes call backpacker kind of arrangement, where you glued everything together and you did not get your support and your OTA that you booked your hotel through was not helpful in any way to get you back home again. Those are very important lessons to be learned for the European travel trade, and therefore we see that an appreciation for this market segment is growing again.
Okay, that's a very detailed answer. I appreciate that, and I think that's something that Lisa and the team, as you all are looking and dissecting what could happen with vouchers, it's similar to our concerns with visas being offered, and what happens when in China it takes way too long to get a visa to come to America. Do I go somewhere else? And when I go somewhere else, does it take me 10 years to consider coming back to America because I've discovered destinations that perhaps don't require a visa? So we're going to have to be very mindful of the fact that consumer confidence is going to be challenged. There are hotel chains now, they're doing one that I can't think of which one. I'm sure if I say Marriott, it's going to be Hilton that's doing something with Lysol. And that level of consumer confidence is going to be, that makes me feel comfortable because I know the brand and who's going to do something with Clorox. And so as we're looking at consumer confidence, when will airlines do some of the same things? And how long before someone is looking at coming to the US if we don't have our act together, or if we don't have cleanliness standards, and they start tweeting about it and commenting on it, then they're looking at going to other destinations and using those vouchers because they don't have to use them here. So, Gloria, as I look at, that question, because, the other part of that is, if I'm checking into a hotel, if I'm traveling, I'm expecting the working community to wear a mask and to have safety standards in place. And I'm not necessarily asking you to answer from the standpoint of a hotel, but what if I show up at a hotel and they have a mask and the standard for that destination, Vicky in Utah says everyone has to wear a mask, which right now everyone is saying, but I don't have one. Who supplies it? Do I sell it to them? Do I give it to them for free? You're looking at all these operating costs. What happens when you get on the bus and you don't have these things in place? Are those concerns that you have, Gloria, or are you thinking about it as you're looking at the consumer confidence perspective and booking business into the U.S.?
Well, first of all, Asia market is likely a little bit different. People's actions are a bit more cautious, even actions and especially like wearing mask. You was actually, just now you mentioned about like long haul flight, 10, 12 hours flights, actually wearing a mask. As a matter of fact, it has always been very common to see people wearing masks, especially on the flights, especially for the Japanese. You see actually it's like even normal situations in the past, you walk in the street, you see people's actually wearing masks also. Somehow there actually is a kind of like hygiene measures they're doing, the personal hygiene that they're doing for themselves. So we've been seeing that. So like having masks or wearing the mask, it is really something that especially for the Asian market is pretty common. So even actually like way back during SARS or other situation with the flu, we see a lot of people's actually already wearing masks. And then even actually some of our kind of like our clients, our counterparts were saying, we're the only people coming out from the airport, getting off from the immigrations, and we're still wearing masks. Where the whole actual world in US, they're not doing anything like that. So,
right.
So this is not really some things that is unusual, especially for a market. Just now also mentions about, in Europe, lucky that they have this like travel coupons. Very unfortunate, actually, we do not see anything actually in Asia because majority booking time is very short. So by the time that we actually have stopped all the traveling, majority of booking has been canceled. We do not really see too much of actual future bookings that is still on the books. But as I said, the booking period actually is for the whole Asian market is a little bit different. It's very short. So once actually we have the airlift, we'll see actually like when people are promoting and things are actually back on the track. And this is actually what we feel. Now, another thing is about the safety, especially with all the hygiene, disinfections actually applying. This helps because we're seeing Hilton was the first one I think they did with the Lysol. And then I believe Marriott has already started actually like kind of like releasing all the marketing materials actually about how they are cleaning with all the hotels. And this date basically really helps because especially Asians, they do have a very strong confidence on the brand name, and especially with all the Western country. Even though we're seeing actually the hardest hit is really all in the Western country that they're seeing, but they still have actually a very strong confidence, especially with our destination. This is one thing. Now, another thing is also mentions about, about the travelings within the market. We are also seeing actually, like, for example, Japan. Japan actually is the government is planning to issue, let me see here. The actually is a recovery travel coupon. However, this recovery travel coupons that they are doing is really to encourage the domestic market. It is only actually eligible for domestic traveling. And this is actually what Japan government is planning to do. And they actually already budget about 1.7 billion or more for the budgets for the travel coupons. And this campaign, they will actually kind of started with, different phases. So, but of course, this actually have to relate to 2021 for the Olympic, because they still encourage actually all the business. So, again, it's seeing the market, especially on that part, especially from Japan. I do not see actually too much of a positive sign right now for actually even the, I would say the winters for 2020. For 2021, it all depends on actually how we are really looking into, let's say, for Japan market. But any other than Japan market in Asia, as I mentioned, because the booking period is always very short. So any of again, is airlift start actually promoting the flights, the airlines start promoting the flights, we will be actually seeing, definitely an increase. I've been talking to actually some of our partners in Singapore, in Hong Kong, and also in the in Indonesia. Everyone actually are already been kind of planning for the end of the year, not necessary against for the fall, but they are actually planning. And so as we speak, right now, the most active actually destinations that they are already start doing promoting starting 2 weeks ago into actually webinar is really out from some of our competitor country, such as Australia.
And Gloria, do you think we should be concerned? I mean, what you're saying makes a lot of sense, but as we're listening to what you're saying, there's still a sentiment, and Robert Graff asked a question, but I was thinking about it as well. Should we be concerned at all that the Asian traveler might be concerned about coming to the US because of what they've heard in terms of how they're being received? I mean, is that something we should be worried about?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Yes, meaning that, they are kind of feel surprised that, what had happened actually in the Western country, I would say, US, and also in some parts of Europe. But as I mentioned, Asians normally they have very strong confidence in what actually is the measures that the Western country is doing. So they still have very strong confidence. If we're able to actually deliver the message, they know that majority, actually, I would say, they will believe in what actually our, all the Western countries will actually deliver the safety measures that we're committing. And this is some things that, yes and no, I would say, again, is no meanings that the people's actions will tend to still have, strong confidence in what we are actually kind of announcing. So,
Okay.
yeah, of course, what had happened, it is actually very negative. And, but, we're still actually getting still a lot of attentions when we are doing a little bit of our own broadcastings within our network.
Okay, makes sense. So as we look at our new normal, and I don't even want to think about this being our new normal, but I'm thinking about beyond this, temperature checks. I remember 25 years ago traveling internationally and being alarmed at seeing someone with a machine gun in an airport. Whereas now in America, it's, because everything happened internationally before it happened here, and now it's kind of commonplace. So we've seen the videos as parts of Wuhan were coming back online, the digital screening, and we've been hearing about a lot more of that, even for going to major events in the US. I'm kind of curious, and this is one of the questions, and we've got basically 10 minutes left, and I'm going to the questions that are being asked. Vicki, what are your thoughts in terms of the new normal, and what are the expectations? And are you all talking about it? Because you're really talking about people going to national parks, and how does that, is it necessary in that particular arena versus Peter bringing, folks coming in from a part, coming into the U.S. is there an expectation getting on an airplane or off an airplane in terms of digital screening? I know you don't have an answer specifically, but I'm sure you're thinking about it.
Yep. So I'll say a couple of things. First, I think that discussion around whether we get our temperature taken when we go into an airport, I think that's a very reasonable discussion. I'm much happier to have someone swipe something across my forehead than I am to do all the undressing that we've been having to do over the years. And if we can figure out some protocols that heighten a sense of safety about the other people that are getting on a plane around us, I actually really welcome that. And I think it goes to a couple of questions. Kathleen asked the question about who is the CDC for international travel? I think that's a great question. And this goes to our work at US Travel and Brand USA. US Travel, I think, has done a very good job of advocacy to try to get us into a stabilization phase so that many of our small businesses have the best chance of surviving because they've got a little money to get them by. And I think the next phase of discussion will be around this. How do we create a national sense of public safety? Is it a U.S. travel, a set of policies and practices that we establish at the national level? Is it creating partnerships with key countries where we make commitments about the public safety initiatives and we expand, sort of like we have with the visa program with Brand USA? I think these are really good questions that need to be sorted now that we understand a little bit better that COVID is a long-term issue that we're going to have to establish best practices around.
That makes a lot of sense. And to your point about U.S. Travel Association, the last, Infectious Disease Society of America is headquartered here in the backyard in Washington, D.C. So there was a conversation with IDSA and stakeholders in terms of them helping take the lead on what makes the most sense. There are questions coming out from this panel as to, you get off a plane, you don't have a temperature, you go to the hotel 2 days later, you might have one. How many times are you going to be screened? There's going to be a lot of questions like that there are just no answers right now that we're going to have to make sure that we ask the health community. I would like to think that once we build a better relationship again with World Health Organization, which we know what our current administration has done in terms of funding, we would have expectations of them in terms of helping from a global perspective, because it just makes sense. The other question from Gabrielle Martinez, who's thinking about detecting diseases, viruses before they present symptoms, and how will that be addressed? Every time I get on the plane, I ask that question, and perhaps it'll resonate more. I don't know if anyone on the panel has an answer or any feedback on that, but I think there are going to be a lot of those types of questions that we should be asking of the associations in which we are participating in. I know IITA is playing a role in everything that U.S. Travel is doing because it needs to be uniform in terms of an answer for obvious reasons, and realize that it's not going to be perfect, and there are going to be cases, and unfortunately there are going to be other health scares. I mean, this is not the first one. The irony of this versus SARS and Ebola and other things that have happened really in the last 10 years that have affected travel. This is the first that has brought the global community to its knees, and we have to look at it through that lens. I know we've got less than 5 minutes left, so I definitely want to respect whatever questions that are still left out there, but turn it back over to Lisa to perhaps guide us through the next few minutes before we have to end.
Thanks, Elliot. Thank you all, the panelists. What a wonderful group. Round of applause. We're all applauding. So much information, and I know there's as many questions or more than there are answers, but to get your perspective and really hear what's going on with your clients and partners overseas as well is really important for everyone to start hearing. So thank you for that. A lot of the conversation was really focused on the airlines, and next week we are going to have, Wednesday afternoon, we're going to have a session that's brought to us by our own air expert, Alfredo Gonzalez with AG Consulting. And it will feature aviation and tourism consultant Gavin Eckles, GE Consulting and Advisory in Europe. It's really going to take a look at the importance of the airlines and how destinations and airports work with airlines to try to rebuild that business, because they're going to need encouragement and support. So stay tuned next week.
I think you're on mute again, Lisa.
Oh, sorry. When did I get on mute?
Stay tuned, blank.
Stay tuned next week for the airline session. That's and then just, I was wondering if there were any last minute questions.
And while we're seeing if there are any other last minute questions, I don't know if everyone has seen the Travel the New Normal, Travel in the New Norm, should I say, from the U.S. Travel Association. This is something that clearly we can make sure that you all have a copy of. This is the first iteration done with U.S. Travel Association and the alphabet soup of organizations. You know, one of the things I said is we can't have 12 of these. It needs to be one, it needs to be uniform, and it needs to be guided by science and medicine, not by us. So this collaboration gives you some feedback as to some of the initial steps that are being taken, realizing that whatever's in here, whatever they're doing today can change based on whatever science happens, or whatever they may find out, whatever else they may find out about COVID-19 and how it affects humans next week. But this is a step in the right direction. Lisa, I'm assuming that you can send it out, if not already, to everyone, because it gives you some guidelines as to the fact that all these what ifs and how do we deal with the things that keep us up at night, that make us wake up in the morning at 2 o'clock in the morning. That's what this consortium of individuals are focusing on as we're looking at reopening America.
Yeah, thanks, Elliot. That's a wonderful piece, and I applaud U.S. Travel for leading that effort and really pulling the voices together, because it is important that it's unified. So thank you, and we will have it linked to it in our newsletter tomorrow, so be watching for that as well.
Lisa, I have one quick question. Does Elliot realize that he could probably have a part on MSNBC sounding just like Chris Cuomo? He sounds just like him.
Oh, come on, Elliot, you got to say more. Now I have to listen for it.
In the event this doesn't work out, no, yeah, no comment, no. But if this doesn't work out, I might take you up on that. Word on the street is we look just alike too.
That's great. Anything else? Thank you all so much for being a great audience. Thank you to our wonderful panelists and thought leaders. We appreciate your wisdom and your expertise. And we will see you all again next week for our airline panel.